a council decision. We are here to make sure that the community is aware of what the current ordinance has in place.
Now, what is the ordinance seeking to change that's going to influence that particular decision between now and when you make that recommendation or non-recommendation? I mean, what do you seek to get out of this ordinance?
The ordinance calls for us to ensure that individuals in the community are not feeding deer intentionally.
How many people do you think are currently feeding the deer? Like, how much corn's going to how many deer? Because I mean, I can't honestly think that there's much of an impact being made at this time unless people are bringing pallets of deer corn up here, which I don't think is happening.
Well, part of our assessment tonight is to get a feel from that. If indeed individuals feel that the ordinance, what we're currently having in place, we need to do more surveillance, do more enforcement. Those are the kinds of things we hope to get.
I just heard like one 99-year-old lady's feeding deer, and that can't hardly make an impact.
I'm sorry?
I've only heard that one little 99-year-old lady's feeding deer. That can't make much.
There are a lot more people than that feeding the deer.
Yeah. Now, if there was 92-year-old women, that might make an impact. But I don't think that unless they have deer feeders and a lot of corn getting moved around, I bet it's not doing anything.
Well, I'm not here to speak about any individual. Part of it, our goal is to see from you or hear from you whether or not there are more surveillance activities, more educational activity, more signage, more things we as a city can do with the current ordinance. If the things we can do, we're here to listen and to get that input.
Okay, well, my recommendation, I grew up in Northwest Hills, and I was running around the green belt, when I was 12 and 13 trying to catch deer for fun, but now I enjoy seeing them, and a lot of the folks enjoy seeing them. And I think the best thing probably to do, for my assessment, is the deer don't look sick and they don't look malnourished. They're probably just eating local vegetation. If they get hungry, they'll probably just start walking back to Valencia or whatever they do because they're deer. But my recommendation is to do nothing and just let people drive slow.
Your documentation, you talk about an explosion in this area of deer, and I'd like to know where we can find a record on how long you guys have been counting the deer in this area and what has caused us all of a sudden. Because we've lived here for a long time, and I've never seen an explosion of deer.
Exactly.
Well, enforcement.
Where can we find the documents showing the explosion of the numbers?
Yes.
Our petition.
Well, when you say an explosion, what document you're referring to on here? Let me see that.
On the form you handed out.
Or do you want this only?
This is not our document, is it?
Someone's document.
This is the wildlife. This is from Northwest Austin Civic Association, so it's not our document. I can't speak to that.
But something's caused you to be here.
We're here is because City Council passed an ordinance in February 2009, and that ordinance calls upon the city to enforce the intentional feeding of deer ordinance. That is what currently is governing our activity in this area. And so therefore, that calls for us to do education, to do surveillance activities. And so we've been at that for about a year and a half. And so our meeting tonight is to get feedback from you in terms of additional things related to those educational enforcement activities you think we can and should be doing to address the ordinance and make it more effective. That's the purpose of the meeting tonight. And so I'll be happy to answer the question.
A lot of us were at that city council meeting. What has caused us to all of a sudden not feed the deer or not be able to do that? Was that the explosion that caused the city ordinance?
Well, the ordinance came about because citizens approached their city council members and encouraged that the city put an ordinance in effect. And so
Citizens from
therefore,
NWACA.
council agreed, created an ordinance, and charged the department with the responsibility of enforcing it. And so that's how the ordinance came about.
Yes.
Let's try and keep it
But
in
it was
the
a very
so we can make
small
sure that everyone has an
percentage of
opportunity.
people.
Well, first I'd like to thank you for being here and holding it, because I think it's great to have some dialogue in the community about this issue, because it is a very controversial issue. So I appreciate you holding this meeting tonight. Just a couple of questions and one comment. People can go to the Natural Gardeners website, and there's a lot of information in there about deer-resistant plants. That's a question that's asked almost monthly, and it has been for the last 10 to 15 years since I've been listening to the radio talk show on the Natural Gardener. You mentioned them on the tracking reporting. that one of the things that you look for is to ID the number of dead deer. Does that report also include the frequency with which, where those deer are found?
I'm not sure.
We don't have specific
Mesa
locations, we
Drive.
have it by zip code.
Because one of the reasons I ask you is because I've been walking this neighborhood for about 25 years, and I've noticed where there generally is a frequency of those dead deer, and it generally does have to do with traffic. People are driving very quickly, and it's obvious that that has become an issue, because I noticed this TAP, traffic awareness program, that was put in place in this neighborhood, because people are concerned about how quickly people are driving now on Mesa, Far West, all those roads. But generally when I see dead deer, it's because they've been hit by somebody who's been speeding. The other question that I wanted to ask you,
Before you go to that question, let me just respond to that
Sure.
part. If you know of places like that, or you have areas at high risk, it would be helpful maybe to share that with our staff. We'll give you information
Mesa Drive.
afterwards, that you can report that could be part of the information we can have in addition, so that might be helpful as well.
as far as your education is concerned, one of the things that does come to mind is, in all the years that I've been here, I didn't even know about the neighborhood association. I understand there's several of them within the zip code. So if you're going to educate people, and those neighborhood associations are limited, for example, if you have one that's only got 400 members, they're not really speaking for the whole area that's being affected by the deer.
That's right.
I would like for some education within the city to perhaps list all the neighborhood associations that we fall into, so that perhaps we can either join all of them, or we can get their newsletters, or some way to better speak to those neighborhood associations, because if those boards are speaking to you, they may not be representing those of us who are not members of the association. So we would like to be able to have an opportunity to speak outside of those venues, because we know sometimes they don't speak for all of us.
The city, excuse me, Shannon, the city does maintain a community registry of all the homeowners and neighborhood associations within the city. And if you just go to the main city's website, and in the search bar, if you'll just type in community registry, then it'll take you to a link, and that'll list all those.
Okay, so go to the city website to find those neighborhood associations.
Yes.
But what I would say to you too, there's a very large majority of people who are not computer literate in this community, or they just don't have time to go to a website. And so my thinking is there's got to also be some other way to create education and awareness for people who don't have access to the web, or don't really know how to use it and want to be educated about these kinds of issues. So I would say that the city might want to look at some other ways to also create some educational efforts.
Well, along that line, one of the things that we talk about increased education activity, one of the things we are committed to doing is actually working through our public health education approach, and identifying those neighborhood associations, particularly in this area, that are impacted by the ordinance, and scheduling some meetings with those neighborhood associations to come out and talk with them individually, as well as the group. This is the first effort at trying to address collaboratively, but we do agree that we need to do with individual neighborhood associations, because each of them have different unique needs that might be spoken to more in the individual fashion. So we agree with you that, and that's part of that increased education effort we plan to do.
And my last question is that at the start of the meeting, I think Ms. Jones mentioned the fact that this whole idea of removal or any kind of legal means has been eliminated. Is there anywhere in writing, or any way that those of us who are wanting to not have any kind of harvesting of any sort can have some assurance that that actually was a decision that was made, and that we can go to and know that we have some assurance that that's not going to happen?
Well, the ordinance presently does not call for that, and the only thing we can implement is what the ordinance calls for. So at this point in time, that is not part of the law, and that's not part of any of the initiatives that we're responsible for handling. So, I mean, we only can implement what the ordinance calls for, and right now that doesn't call for that.
Okay, thank you for your time.